to solve a problem. The business kind of just evolved from that, if that makes sense. So I think we didn't actually realise we were validating the market until now, when we're building this tech platform. We look back and we're like, okay, wow, we have 4 years worth of event experience that we've learned all of these different things. We actually really know who our target audience is. So I think it definitely made it easier for us to pivot into a tech platform. Whereas I think if we just came up with the idea and wanted to build a tech platform, the next day, we just wouldn't have had that expertise.
And at which point did you start to bring some more people into the business and grow a team?
So when we were events model, we never really had a full-time team, just because we hired freelancers when the events happened. But it was when we raised investment about 1.5 years ago for the actual tech platform. We had to build the tech platform. Sam and I don't have any experience in technology or tech or anything like that. So we're going in blind. And luckily met our CTO now, Ellis. So we actually did go through a recruiter. We didn't think we would, but at the time, I think we just really needed to find someone. So it was just the quickest and easiest. And I think we got so lucky with finding Ellis, because I've heard lots of bad experiences with recruiters. So I don't necessarily think 100%, you're going to find the right person. I think, honestly, I don't know how we found him, and he's just amazing. And then we've got one other girl who's kind of head of content, and she actually came from our community. So we're quite lucky that we have young people within the community who we can work with and know who we are, know who our brand is. So yeah, there's 4 of us. And yeah, I think we're probably at the stage now where we'll probably raise again. So the app is built. We launched it last month, so it's been about 1.5 years building, just launched, and so now this is the part which is probably the most hardest for it.
So the question was, when is the right time to build the team? So I'll talk you through our timeline first. So we went to Entrepreneur First, starting from September 2020. Yeah, I'm losing track of time. But yeah, and then raised from them in January 2021, and then raised the round from a VC 2 months later or so, and like properly closed it about 3 months later. And then we brought in the team only 4 months after that. So right now we're a team of 8, including us founders. So we have 4 engineers, a designer, a growth person, and 2 founders. So why did we wait for so long before bringing in the team when we already had the money? So we raised at the time that we raised, we had 3 pilots in our portfolio. We were working with 3 customers. It was still pilots, so it was still very much validating, would these people actually stay with us later down the line? Would we be able to bring in more customers? So for the next 3 months after we raised, we were still very much testing our idea, so we didn't stop and say, okay, now we know. We had very clear hypothesis again of what we should be building, but we decided to validate it before we start hiring a team and burning through our runway. So we essentially spent another 3 months testing and trying to sell what we had and making sure that we can convert our pilots into long-term contracts. And once we did that, we're like, okay, now we're ready to hire a team. And so at that time, we also started quite gradually. We first hired 2 engineers, then hired a designer, and then once we actually had a much clearer roadmap and some customers actually say, yes, we'll be ready to sign up. Once we had this product working, it's like, okay, now we can hire 2 more engineers. So it was very much, so I guess my main advice here would be don't hire people unless you know what you want them to do. That's, I guess, the key thing here. And since, despite the fact that we raised because we had a really great founder market fit, so we as founders were very credible and we knew the market well, and we were quite clear, we had a lot of evidence about the problem that we were going to solve, but not exactly how we will solve it. So even after we took the investment, we spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out, okay, how are we actually going to solve it? What would the product look like? And so that's why I think it makes sense to do it there.
Was there an investment at first from yourself, like to get the MVP going or the pilot version of your?
In our case, no, because we went through Entrepreneur First, and I recommend everyone Entrepreneur First if you're first-time founders, because so they essentially fund you for the first 3 months of the program, and then you get to pitch to them, and then they give you 80K for 10% of your company. So you can essentially start a company without any investment from yourself, and you're supported from the very start. One can argue that 10% is too much, and so on, but essentially it's 10% of zero, so there's a lot of, I'm not going to get into that, it's a personal choice. Because of that, essentially, we didn't have to fund it by ourselves. So we got some, they call it stipend from EF, and then essentially we raised, and we were able to raise from ABC after that.
We pretty much bootstrapped our whole way until last year, like until we got investment. But we definitely had different revenue streams coming in. So, Sam and I taught ourselves videography on YouTube. So we did videography for a bit. We've run events just because we had event experience. So we're very, very resourceful in terms of finding money alongside what we were doing. But yeah, we didn't raise investment until a year and a half ago. And that was a mixture of angels and family.
And how did your life change to accommodate the start of your own company?
Well, going from corporate to startup life is very, very, very different. I obviously didn't have, a monthly paycheck. So yeah, it's just completely different, but I honestly wouldn't change it. I think, I was saying to Luba that I can't see myself ever working for someone else again. And yeah, I'm trying to think of specific things that have kind of changed in my life.
How much are you working? How much were you working before and how much are you working now?
You see, it's so different because at PwC, you are working late, you're working till 1 a.m. sometimes, but you're working in a bank that you hate your life, you're there, and actually you're there because everyone else is there, you're not actually doing any work. Whereas, yeah, when you have your own company, you don't even notice the hours, it's not, you don't even know what day it is really, because every day you're working, but it doesn't feel like work. You know what I mean? You're actually enjoying opening your laptop and seeing what's happening, and every day is so different. I think it's definitely stimulating. If you really like that kind of environment, and maybe you get bored quite easily. It's just so fun. And yes, it is so difficult sometimes, but there's always a high and there's always a low. So as long as you know that you're going to get through the low, and there will be a high waiting around the corner. It's definitely worth it.
Wait, are you working weekends?
Yeah.
This?
Yeah, no, I work on weekends, but at the same time, this weekend I was in Copenhagen and I was just yeah, guys, I'm not working until yesterday. Do you know what I mean? It's you have your own hours, but it's your own time, so every hour you put in is going back into your own company. So, you're not doing it for anyone else. And that's why you do it, you continue doing it, and it gets better because you can see results and you just learn so much. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's this feeling that if you don't do it, nothing will happen, that keeps driving you forward a lot. I found that in terms of hours, I would say it's quite similar to how I used to work before. I definitely can't work the way I used to when I was 22 anymore. But I found that emotionally it's quite hard, that it just occupies so much of my mind space all the time. I can't actually leave it in the office when I go home. There's no such thing. It's part of my life, and I have to be much more disciplined about how I am because there are a lot of highs and lows. The high are very high, and lows are just, you have to force yourself to keep doing things. So I think I, over time, learned to, again, just be much more disciplined with what I do day to day, to both motivate myself and my team and keep moving it forward. Yeah.
Can I actually add something? So I just want to say that, like, being an entrepreneur, which I hate that word, it actually isn't what it seems like. I think there's so much smoke and mirrors in that startup culture, and like you have to be working every hour of the day, and like, you know, all of this stuff, and that's so untrue. Like, I have such a balanced life. Like, I don't literally look at my laptop every day and, like, you know, get no sleep. I think it's really up to you. That's the beauty of it, right? Like, you have your own control. You can choose your own lifestyle, and just because you don't work every single hour of the day doesn't mean your company isn't going to succeed. Like, I need sleep in order to be efficient, be productive. So yeah, I don't know, I just feel like going into it sometimes, when you look at Twitter, when you look at LinkedIn, and you see all these founders and they're like, oh, I do this, you know, it's just like, they're lying because they're normal people. And yeah, I just want to say that, like, you don't have to be like Silicon Valley.
No, totally. It's like there are no people who, I don't know, get up at 6 a.m. and run a marathon and then you go and like smash it in the office. Like, seriously, it's just impossible. No one does that. Although it may seem so on Twitter or whatever. I personally found, I have several examples in front of me of people who started companies or were trying to start companies, and they were working so much that they eventually burnt out, or fairly quickly burnt out actually, and it didn't go anywhere. So I think pacing yourself and realizing that yes, this is a marathon, and you actually, if you make one step every day, you will actually be further away if you keep running for a bit. And so I think for me that was quite a big learning when I started doing that. I realized that and actually I had I burnt out several times. I worked at management consulting where we worked crazy hours. Seriously, we worked sometimes 16 hours a day. That happens sometimes on some bad projects. So I realized that this is not what I want to do. Like, I'm building this business and I expect to be working on this for the next 5 years at least. And I want to have a nice life. And this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. And it is very sustainable. It is very possible to build a business and progress quite quickly, even if you're not working crazy hours at all. So it's very much about how you build out your routine and how you think about what you want to achieve and working in the right things, because there's so much uncertainty around what you will be doing if you start this. So it's, I think, more about really, I think saying this word, which for me is really key, is discipline and good routine and setting the right goals.
What would you say was the most difficult part of starting your company? It could be like technical thing, like finding the person with the knowledge, or it could be like motivational, or having the right support around you.
What was most difficult? Well, I think to this day, it's like cash flow. Like, we have very, very different, I guess, investment journeys. So we didn't raise any money from VCs. We raised from a few angel investors. So we didn't raise that much. I think we raised 150,000 the first round, and now we've raised another 50,000. So in total, it's about 200,000. But that goes quickly on salaries. You know, like every month we're paying £15,000 in salaries. So that the money goes so quickly. So I'd say there are so many times when Sam and I are like, oh my God, are we going to be able to pay everyone's salaries the next month? And then miraculously we do, the client pays the invoice on time or something like that. So yeah, I think definitely finance has always been a struggle. You guys.
For me, I think there are a couple of things. One is patience. It always feels like, oh, I have this idea, and I wish we're just going to do some things, and they're just going to happen quickly. Like, nothing happens quickly, actually. You have to work on this for a while, really think carefully about where you want to get to in 6 months, set yourself long-term goals and work towards them carefully, slowly, and then you get there. This has been my experience so far. So learning this patience and planning ahead has been things that I struggled with at first, which I was actually surprised when I found myself in that situation, because when you work for other companies, like, oh, okay, it's kind of clear what the company goals are, okay, I see how I slot into that. Even if you're a senior manager, it's still fairly easy to figure out where you go. But when you start a company, there's so much uncertainty. And so setting these kind of goals, imagining yourself to be, where am I actually going to be in a year's time? Can I set a goal that I think I will realistically hit, and then break it down into really small parts and understand what I'm actually supposed to be focusing on today, tomorrow, and the day after. And once you do that, once you go through this exercise, your life becomes so much easier. But at first, it didn't come naturally to me. So I think a lot of the things we were doing were quite reactionary. We were like, okay, we heard this feedback. Oh, should we be doing this? Should we be doing that? But then you have to, at some point, like, choose and commit, and again, like, set yourself a really long-term goal, and then go and go for it. So, yeah, I think I struggled with this at first, sort of accepting the fact that I have to take this risk and that punt for, like, our direction that we're going in, which I think is supported by a lot of evidence, and I really believe in. But it's still there's a degree of assumption, and that you have to accept.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
You were setting goals, but how many of those deadlines did you meet? And if not, how did you face the uncertainty?
I think it's always about the feedback loop. So, like, you set yourself a goal, you try to make it as realistic as you can. You're out by 20%, and then you're like, okay, 20%, given the knowledge we had at the time, is it reasonable? Did we set the right goal? So coming back to your goal setting and figuring out what could I have done better there. What did I learn? What do I know now, right now, to be able to set a better goal next time? So it's very much about that. And just to share, so the way we run our planning, now that we have a bigger team especially, so we set goals quarterly level, but then we do check-ins essentially on like mid-quarter to see, okay, where we are against our OKRs, which we try to make as data-driven as we possibly can. And we do the same thing on a weekly basis. We set our goals for the week and actually check mid-week, like where are we against our goals? Why are we not meeting them, or maybe they're not ambitious enough? So I think it's being very, very clear about, okay, what do we want to achieve? Are we on track? And also what our goals mean. Sometimes people set goals that we all expect to hit. Sometimes you try to set an ambitious goal with like 70% chance of meeting. But it's going through that feedback loop and discussion with yourself, with your team, and being very honest about why you're not hitting them. Maybe we're just, unrealistic, or maybe we didn't work hard enough, or maybe, maybe these were not the right goals either, when you see that you've done everything but you didn't achieve your metrics, for instance. So I think it's constantly trying to ask yourself, are we doing the right thing? But also, like, I think it's about discipline, like documenting it, going back to it, and asking yourself these questions even if it's uncomfortable.
Thank you. Now I'm gonna get into juicy part, which is around investments. So I would like to know, how did you start looking for investments? What kind of research did you do? How much did you how did you know how much to ask for, and all of these things?
Yeah, so we had a really interesting investment journey. It's been a huge struggle. It wasn't easy, and it's like scars me today thinking about it. But I was speaking to Luba before about our investment journey, and Luba mentioned earlier, founder market fit, is that right? So Sam and I, in terms of investor, like what investors look for, we ticked none of the boxes. Okay, so we had no experience in recruitment, which is the market we were going for. We didn't have a tech product built, so nothing to show the investors. None of us were technical, so we could actually build the product that we wanted to do. none of us worked in a thriving startup before, like Monzo, which is, you know, amazing. Like, we hadn't got that experience, so we had a lot of no's, and like, I think we emailed over 300 investors. We had a lot of meetings, and to be fair, they weren't awful. They weren't like, this is a really bad idea. The general consensus was like, yeah, your idea is interesting, but you don't have any of this other stuff that we're looking for. And because it was so early on, they weren't willing to take that risk, basically. So yeah, it was really, really difficult, because like, you're pitching an idea, you're basically pitching what you have been working on for the last 5 years, and someone is literally just rejecting you every single day. And like, you know, it's not a normal emotion to be rejected every day, like in that short period of time. So obviously there were moments when either of us, Sam and I, were like, oh God, this is a bad idea, like let's, you know, what are we doing? Like, we lost so much confidence in our ideas. Like, one person was like, why have you called your company Eric? Like, that's really masculine, like asking us to change the name. We were like, what? So we've just learned so much about the space, and essentially it is a game. It's a game that you have to learn how to play, and there's certain rules, and like, if you play the game, like, we tested a few things, which is quite interesting as well. Like, you know, we are both female founders, like, we didn't really have like the kind of tick box exercise, but we sometimes just went in with like pretending we had confidence, and we actually had male like alter ego names that we used to call each other before investor meetings to just kind of like pump ourselves up. And we were way too nice. Like, in the investment meetings, we were like, oh, you know, this is Sam, she's like my best friend since we're like 8 years old, and they were like, oh God, like, we don't want to invest in these people. So then we would go in next time and be way more like serious, or like, you know, we didn't really talk much about, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's weird because it's not, you're so conscious of what you're saying, because people are judging every word that you say. And at the end of the day, it is just, it's just someone else's decision and bet that they think your company is going to do well. Do you know what I mean? Like, they cannot predict that any company is going to do well. So when they tell you that, oh, you know, no one's going to pay for that product, like, they actually don't know. They're just assuming what the facts are in front of them. So yeah, no, so sorry, going back to your question. So I think we quickly realised that VCs, well, we first realised that there were different types of investors, which we didn't realise. So there's venture capital, and then there's kind of angel individuals, and I think we thought that they were all the same, but VCs are definitely looking for a criteria, and that's okay if your startup doesn't fit with the VC criteria. That doesn't mean that your company isn't going to be successful. Like, they are just looking for the next Uber, the next Airbnb, and that's you know, the growth that we were talking about before. And that's okay if the company isn't that. You know, you can still earn £10 million a year and not give so much of your equity away. So I think it's just really important to actually know the basics of the investment landscape first, and really understand what investors you want to go for, because it really does make a difference. So in the end, we went for 4 angel investors. One of them is my brother, and then the other 3 are, honestly, we cold emailed people. Cold emailing worked every time for us. It just, yeah, so like I said, we emailed over 400 investors. The way we found investors, this is a little trick, is that we paid, you know, Fiverr.com. You can find some people on Fiverr.com who will find emails for you. So they are people, like, mainly from India, and they essentially scroll through LinkedIn. They have a database, and they have like tools and stuff. So all you need to do is give them a criteria of who you're looking for, and they come back with emails. I don't know if that's actually GDPR compliant, but anyway, you know, we did that anyway. And yeah, we had one guy from America, literally didn't know him. He invested £70,000 in the hour that we spoke with him. But I think with angels, it's definitely the passion and the like for example, with Theo, the investor, he had Gen Z kids, so he was really invested in the idea and was really passionate about, you know, what we stood for. So I guess that was a much easier sell to those people who knew and understood why we're doing it, as opposed to big VCs, scary VCs.
What was the question?
Investments. How did you find investments? How did you know how much to ask?
So we were quite lucky. So we went to, again, Entrepreneur First, and so our initial investment was with them. But both my co-founder and I were at Monzo before, and since we're both quite early there, we're actually new investors of Monzo Bank, and so they ended up investing in us. So Passion Capital, they've been amazing partners to us. So we essentially had the network to reach out to people and get the right conversation, and we quite quickly got the term sheet. I'd say one thing, at early stages, the key thing that investors are looking at, they, as you said, you're pitching to them and they actually have no idea most of the time. And the reason people actually invest at the really early stage when you don't have a lot is, do I think that you're an investable person and that you actually know what you're doing? Like, did you work on this market before? Do you know the problem better than I do? Do I believe that you'll be able to pull it off? Like, what kind of relationship do you have with your co-founder? This is the type of question you usually get at this kind of pre-seed, really early stage, because the product, sure, we had traction, a little bit of traction to that stage. We had 3 pilots, but really to see how that would evolve into a large company, it's very hard to say. So it's very much a guess, and the best information they have is information about you, really. What have you done before? So it's about finding, so if you have if you don't know what idea to start working on and you're still navigating, okay, what are the good options for me? In terms of raising later, if you start something in an area you have expertise in and have very clear experience that you can show, it will be much easier for you later down the line. So that was the case for us. Yeah, I guess in terms of raising from a VC or not, I think it's a particular path. So as you mentioned, VCs, they're looking for unicorns. So they're investing a lot. So it's sometimes very small tickets, especially at really early stages, to then hope that one of these companies will become a future Uber. And so when pitching, it's also one of those things that we have to think about. Like, okay, do we actually want to be that type of company, or do we want to bootstrap potentially? Because again, this could be a really successful company, actually building it from scratch and not taking money from anyone, right? So it very much depends on the type of business that you want to build. And by definition, some businesses are just not going to be unicorns because the model is just not that scalable, and that's also okay. So I think not all businesses are VC investable for that reason. And so we, at first, we weren't sure that this is for us. But going through the EF, we realized, okay, we are actually building a software business. So it makes sense. But again, there was one other question I had, which was, I forget, maybe I'll know later.
I want to know, how did you guys celebrated the success of receiving investments?
Not bad.
Maybe a few drinks, I can't remember.
Yeah. Maybe like bought some clothes.
No, I just want to say though, because I'm really passionate about this whole like investment scene, because I think when we went into it, like we didn't understand this whole VC, like, you know, there's just different types of investors, and I think, you know, daily we would be looking at TechCrunch or LinkedIn, and I think this culture of celebrating investment is actually really wrong, and I think it's not about that anymore. It shouldn't be about that, because you just got the money. That doesn't mean that you've done anything. And I think nowadays, like, especially early founders, they think that they need to raise all this money, and that means that you have a successful business. But that doesn't mean anything. And I think it's just yeah, I don't think, don't worry about that basically. Like, I actually never look at TechCrunch anymore because, yeah, you just get depressed.
Yeah, I think with raising from VC, it also comes with an expectation of growth. So you can't just be like growing your business at the pace that you like. Actually, like, it's very much expected that you have a particular growth rate to be able to raise the next round. So it's a very different type of business if you decide to go into it. And so, yeah, it's not for everyone for sure, and that's what we think.
What were the challenges that you faced whilst asking for investments that were related to being a woman?
For me, to be honest, I felt nothing but support. So some of our angels, they come from a fantastic network called Alma Angels. So they specifically invest in diverse teams. And yeah, these people are really, really great. And if you decide to start raising, I would really recommend reaching out to them. So I felt a lot of support actually from various networks I had.
Yeah, Our Angels is good. I actually say honestly, I didn't want to go into raising investment and thinking that we were an all-female founding team. Like that was never a thought. But if I am honest, like, I do think that it has, like, I always would love to know if two men pitched Eric, whether that would be a different scenario. I don't know. I hope it's not. Sam and I actually really want to do that as a test, have a fake company and then get 2 females and 2 males. But you are pitching to mainly men. Like, that is a fact. So I think naturally, it's quite daunting. Naturally, we were definitely going in with less confidence. They would use lingo that we didn't really know. We didn't really feel comfortable, pushing back. So I think it was definitely challenging. But again, I think if you realise it's a game and you don't take it personally, it definitely helps. I think just naturally as women, we're just a bit more emotional probably, and we pick up on things a lot. So if someone's telling me that your business is bad, it's quite hard for me to move on to the next. Whereas other people might be able to do that easily.
About one last question, then I'll open up to the floor. So how do you think this experience of starting your own company, go through all these successes and failures and through the investment journey, hiring people, has changed your personality and your growth?
I think I talked about this a little bit already. For me, I realized I have to be much more disciplined and have a much stricter routine to achieve things that I want to. I think when I was working for someone else, it's almost someone else structured it for me. And now I'm actually responsible for doing it for myself, but also for everyone on my team. So I think it's that really. I think the other thing is, I was one of those people who didn't like posting things on social media or being particularly vocal in public. I mean, I was a senior manager and I had a lot of management experience, but reaching out to people I didn't know was definitely a barrier for me. Now it's like, it's all okay. Everyone is actually out there to not help you, but if you ask for help, people will help you. I think I had this slightly different perception of what is it like to just build connections and what is it really the word network means. Actually, if you reach out to people, genuinely people will help. I had really that shift of sort of like the world is actually really friendly when I started doing this, just by amount of support I got. So.
It's definitely built my confidence. I think growing up, I was actually quite a shy kid. Like I said before, I kind of conformed to my parents and did what everyone else told me to do. I never really thought for myself until I took the leap, and my co-founder, obviously, being my best friend, has helped so much. So I definitely think having a co-founder is really, really important. I don't think I could do it by myself. But yeah, I think you just learn. You're learning so much. You're building your confidence in so many things. And yeah, I think I've changed. I have changed. I've definitely changed so much as a person. And I think also knowing your strengths is really important. So Sam and I always, like, anyone who works for us, we always make them do a personality test. I don't know if any of you guys have done personality tests, but they're really, really good. Because knowing your strengths and doubling down on your strengths is one of the most important things that I've definitely learned. You don't have to be good at everything, but just being self-aware, I think, really helps, especially when you're working with a team. You kind of know which section you're really good at, or where you can kind of give value, and you know where other people are better than you, and yeah, so I think I know myself more now.
That's amazing. And thank you for helping us tonight as well with this event. It's been very inspiring to have you here. Have you got any questions from the audience?
I wanted to ask, when you were going through those investments and your confidence was being knocked, how did you still sustain confidence in your idea, your concept, and powering through that all?
I think it's just looking at reminding yourself what you've been through, and like just remembering all of the amazing things that you've done. Like at the time, we had just won Apple as a client, again, not being in the recruitment space, winning one of the largest companies in the world, and people were still telling us, our idea wasn't very good or whatever it is. So just, reminding ourselves like, oh my God, we've been doing this for 4 years, we're still here, we're still, what is it, like startups fail, most startups fail in the first 2 years or something, like, just those little wins of like reminding yourself, actually, we've done so well to get to where we are, again, yeah, saying that not the investor doesn't really, if you kind of just change the mindset and be like, we know everything, the investor doesn't know anything, that really, really helps.
What keeps you motivated?
For me, it's definitely the problem that we're solving. Like, that goes above everything. Like, if I can make change in the world, and like, we get feedback from our community, and they're like, oh, I just got a job, or like, oh my God, thank you so much for this. That is 100% what makes us motivated anyway, that we know that we are changing a system that is broken, and that we are genuinely serving other people. That is above everything.
We're solving a problem in customer support, which is not as easy for most people to relate, but for me, I don't know, having gone through scaling support at Monzo, I feel quite passionate about it. But to be completely honest, I think for me, the reason I started the business, it was not as problem driven. For me, it was more, how can I learn more? What is the next challenge for me? And I kind of feel about this the same way right now. It's like, okay, can I actually figure this out? Okay, right now the next step for us is supposed to be X. Can we actually figure out and like get these new customers, or figure out what is the right thing in terms of the product?
Could you tell us a bit more about the early adopters? In what way do you get them on board? What do they look for? Anything in particular that helped you get them on board?
So for us, we found 3 companies that agreed to try us as a pilot. So we were solving a very niche problem for them around sending SMS as part of the voice flow. I'm sorry, it's a very particular sector. But yeah, we were solving a very niche problem for them. And so we were very transparent about where we are in our journey. We're just saying, hey, we're just starting out, we're just testing this problem. Is this a problem that you would like us to solve for you? Would you be willing to pay for this? How much? And like, we're having a very honest conversation about the price as well, because usually having people to pay for something is a very good sign that you're onto something as well. essentially, again, we were very transparent about that. In terms of actual pilots, we tried to define as much as possible what the success looked like for them. It's in B2B, this is especially relevant, like how much money I helped you save, what kind of metrics did I help you improve, and so on. Essentially agreeing on how long this will run and working with people really, really closely all the time. Like, is it actually working out the way you expected it to? If not, why? And making your early adopters as happy as you can. This is like the core thing you should be doing. Essentially, the way to finding your niche and then making these people as happy as you can, and then expanding. This is sort of the way to go. And so for us, the 3 early adopters that we had, we still work with them, and essentially we talk to them fairly frequently, and every problem they have we try to solve as soon as we can and get as much feedback as we can from them.
I think for us, finding what the pain points are is the most important thing, and then we would test the pain points by like low-hanging fruit. So, for example, we would put on an event, a free online event for employers who are XYZ, and see who signs up to it, because if they're signing up to it, it's obviously a really big problem for them. Another thing that you can do is on your website, you can offer like a free, I think we offered like a free PDF guide or something like that. It was like, a free guide to recruit Gen Z, something like that. And again, you can promote that on LinkedIn and just get people to put their email put their email, and then in return they get this guide. So then you're already knowing who the real keen people are, because they obviously have the problem so badly and they're signing up to something for free, and in return you're giving them a little bit of advice, and then hopefully you can contact them.
Just to add in terms of how we actually found those people. So for us, our customers are heads of customer support in different companies, and so we literally just reached out to them by LinkedIn. So we didn't really know any of these people before.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, was it harder to actually attract talent into your companies? Because as much as you can use recruiters, at the end of the day, there's so much competition. So how did you get those people on board?
Yeah. It was one of the things I was really worried about as well when we started recruiting, like how we're going to convince these people to join us. We're so early stage. We're also building a customer support tool, which is, it's something that you have to be excited about, which, and understand the problem. But actually I found that there are particular people who really want to work for really early stage startups that are just figuring it out. And genuinely, so people that we were competing for were not people that were applying to Google. We were competing for people who were applying for very single stage startups, essentially. And so once we actually explained the problem and what we're doing and how we're approaching it, we found that, yes, actually there's a very large pool of really amazing people that would be interested. So,
I think for us it's actually a little bit easier because it's, everyone who works with us has the same passion. They want to change career advisors too. So I think we really sold anyone who wanted to work for us was the vision, the mission, the big change that we were going to make in the world. So definitely the people, our CTO especially, he's not coming on board really for the salary. He's coming on board because he, has exactly the same mission as us. So yeah, I think it's a little bit easier if you can find people who really get the problem that you're trying to solve.
How did you mentioned that you cold emailed angel investors? How did you agree the terms of the investment and the legal contracts?
How did I agree the terms of the investment? Yeah. So we use seed legals, and we did a convertible note. I think there's like a couple of other phrases. I can't remember. A seed fast, I think, is what it's called on seed legals. But essentially, it's actually a loan, so they can give you the money straight away, but it converts into shares at a later date, depending on certain terms. So it's a really, really good way to raise money from angel investors, particularly because you can literally get. And I think we had that phone call with the American investor on the Friday, and the money was in the bank on the Monday. And we use C-Legals. Everything's like they create all of the documents, so all you need to do is sign and send it across. So I definitely recommend that. And yeah, it's all kind of. There's quite standard terms, so we didn't really even need to think about it that much.
Okay. Now, what kind of percentage would you give away in terms of, like, I guess, for venture capital investments?
So we see you at that stage. Once we started raising, we had no clear idea, okay, how much should we raise and we can figure out, given our plans, but what's the valuation to expect and so on. It turned out that these things, the way they're calculated is we figure out, okay, this is how much I need for the next 18 months, and typical amount that we see stake at the pre-seed is between like 15 and probably 25%. And the reason this is so much is because they will get diluted later in the rounds, so they do expect quite a lot to invest in that stage, and that's how you calculate the valuation essentially. So we ended up giving out 10% of EF, and then on top of it, about 15.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like with angels, it's so different. I think we've all our investors are less than 10%.
In what ways would you say your co-founders have played a really important role? And if you were looking for a new co-founder now, what would be the things you'd be looking for?
I mean, support is by far the biggest thing. Like, for some reason, Sam and I are, whenever one is kind of having a low moment, the other one is high, and we've never both been low together. So that helps. I don't know what it's going to be like when we're both having a low patch. But yeah, it's just having, that friend or kind of companion just to be like, reminding you why you're doing this and reminding you of, your goals, how far you've come. So for me, definitely, it's support. Also, Sam and I are very different in terms of our strengths. So I definitely would recommend finding a founder who complements you. I think having the same set of skills might not work as well. But you're learning all the time, so I'm sure you can pick up stuff. But yeah, I think we just really complement each other, support, and just fun. Like, having someone to enjoy the journey with is just so much fun. Like, I don't know who you'd celebrate with, like yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's one of the most important decisions that you can make when you're founding a business. I spend most of my time with my co-founder, more than with anyone else in my life, literally. So you have to really like the person that you're with. And having a co-founder, I found it to be so important because, as you said, you do have highs and lows at different points, and having someone that help you and say that everything will be okay and this is how we're going to tackle it, and then you do that for them later down the line. That's super, super important. But of course, you as a team, when you're super small, as much skill differentiation that you can, diversification that you can have, because you have to do so much, and a lot of the things we have to do day to day. Well, I have to do day to day. I'm not an expert in. So essentially, if you can find someone who can cover things that you're not good at, that's still part of that.
At what point did you decide to bite the bullet and quit your jobs?
At what point we decided to quit our jobs?
Yeah.
So we quit our jobs, well, I quit my job when we both had offers from Entrepreneur First, and we already decided to work together. So at that stage, I quit my job.
I think we were thinking about quitting our jobs. Sam was working at a different company, and she actually was made redundant. So she got a redundancy package. So we were like, okay, actually this is quite good timing because you've got some, money to go do yourself. And then, I think I was just like, okay. But yeah, it was a bit of like a sign, I think.
Have you or would you consider giving equity to some of your early employees, or is that something any of them have asked you for, and how did that work?
For us, it's like they earn their shares. So like the longer they are at the company, then they can earn shares. So yeah, I think we definitely offer shares.
Yeah, for sure we do. So a typical thing that you do when you raise from VC is you have a 10% option pool for employees, and we have it as well. And so for our early employees, we give out general shares for sure. We really want everyone to be invested in what they're building and making sure the company succeeds.
Yeah, I was wondering about if you learned anything about productivity, because you talked about the work-life balance and working every time. But I can also imagine that the to-dos are endless to grow your business. So what did you learn during the journey? You talked about discipline already a bit, but yeah, to upgrade the productivity during the day maybe.
I think it's that self-awareness piece of really knowing yourself. Like Sam and I are actually so different. Like I can sit at my laptop, so at like 8, and then I can literally work intensely for like a long period of time. But then I have to have like weekends, sometimes work weekends, but I have to have days off. Whereas Sam is quite like, she works every day, but like she needs her mornings to like, exercise and do something. So it's like knowing how you work best, and that's okay if it's not the norm. Do you know what I mean? Like if you wanted to work at 1 a.m. till 6 a.m. because that's you, then that's fine. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's like trying to come away from what we think is productivity as well, or like what we think working hours is, and just really learning like how you work best, and telling other people that as well. Otherwise, they're going to think that you're not working in the day, and you are working. But
yeah, I think for me, it's eliminating all the busy work, if you know what I mean. Just really figuring out what really needs to be done and doing it really well. I think I found that because you have to make so many decisions and you don't actually know how these decisions will play out very frequently until maybe months later, and there's so much uncertainty that it actually takes up a lot of my mind, even if I'm not doing something specific or productive right now. So for me, actually, again, I'm coming back to setting longer term goals and breaking it down as much as I can to very specific bits, and just going through these bits, like to-do list as much as I can, helped me a lot, because I think when I first started doing this, it's something that I struggled with, like, okay, which direction do I actually run right now? There's just so much to do. So essentially, like, coming back to your goals and breaking it up into small pieces.
I'm just going to add something.
like you definitely then realise that time is everything. So it's then shaving off stuff that I think when you start a company first, you don't realise is time consuming. So like Sam and I used to together go to every meeting, which was just didn't make sense. So now we're rarely in a meeting together. We just decide who needs to go. Do we even need to go? Like, can that be in an email? Also emails, like my email, I don't even say hi. Do you know what I mean? Like to, but I'm not nice. I'm just like tell you. That's it.
You mentioned when you started this a book that you would recommend everyone to read. Like, what books did you both read to help you on your journey?
Yeah, so the one I mentioned was Mom's Test. So it's essentially about how to interview your customers in a way that they won't lie to you. It's essentially a reference that if you ask your mom how good is your product, she will tell you that it's amazing. So how can you ask the question, even if your mom, in a way that she won't lie to you and actually tell you what the outcome of this might be. So essentially it teaches you how to ask the right questions to really figure it out. I really recommend it. It's actually very short, and it also talks about how to reach out to people to get those interviews. The other book that right now has been quite important for me, we're focusing on traction a lot, like how do we actually find customers, find them in a scalable way, organize conversations, so the whole sales process. So I found the book Traction really good. It's quite Traction.
It's called Traction.
Traction. It's really, I found it that, well, it has a framework of how to think about it, like all sorts of different channels of how to approach customer acquisition, and it's definitely really helpful.
I'm not really much of a reader, but I listen to podcasts. So I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but Diary of a CEO, I am a bit obsessed with that one at the moment. But Back Yourself is also a really good one around investment. He basically interviews investors, so you kind of get it from the investor's point of view. And How I Built This, I don't know if you guys know that one, but that's really good for just inspiration, like hearing. He interviews all of the kind of tech CEOs, so like Instagram, Bumble, Peloton, and it's all about how their journey of how they came where they are.
As you were speaking, I had a couple of other books come up that I found really helpful. So Lean Products is fantastic about how to come up with an MVP and test your idea. And I'm going to get so Lean Products, and I personally, so just like you said, How I Built This is fantastic. So they literally share their journeys. Really famous founders, the products that you're all using, and they share how they actually built this, and this is really amazing. I personally find it really inspiring to read stories of other people. So I, for instance, really enjoyed Shoe Dog. It's about Nike, how they built this, and this is a really inspirational story. You would never think Nike would actually do it that way. So really recommend it.
One more last question.
How do you navigate any differences and conflicts with co-founders?
We try to talk it out as much as we can, and so we sometimes we have lengthy conversations. There's a very particular topic that we always disagree on that right now comes to my mind, and so we tend to talk it over and over and over and over, and essentially come up with arguments as much as we can. And sometimes we need to go away because we've become too emotional or too invested in our own arguments, and actually lay it down on paper and come back to them again and say, okay, what are the really pros and cons? Because a lot of the decision making that you do is not black and white, It's like, what kind of risks am I willing to accept here? What is the worst outcome? What is the best outcome here? So it's always kind of a spectrum. And so your disagreement is also, I believe that risk is here is X, and I believe that risk here is Y, And so you try to make it as well documented as possible. That's how we try to approach it. But there are certain things that we, sometimes I just have to let it go, and, because someone just feels more strongly about it at the time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, I think communication is key. I think definitely going away, like not having to make a decision there and then, just being like, here's my side, here's your side, let's go away and come back. And every time we've done that, the other person has been like, oh no, you're always doing this better. You know what I mean? Like, I think just having that space to think. Not like you kind of have to, it's not a friendship. It's a very different type of relationship. It's a, I don't even know what to call it. They actually need, found relationship. But it's like, you're not, because I think at the beginning we were obviously friends, so we didn't think we could say, not insulting things, but it could come across as if you were like insulting someone. So you kind of hold back a bit, and you're a bit like, you don't actually honestly say how you think because you don't want to hurt the other person's feeling. Whereas when we basically got past that and we were like, okay, I'm not, like, we love each other so much as friends, like, that's never going to go away. So even if, you annoy me, blah, 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 like, I'm not going to take that personally. And just knowing that it's for the business, do you know what I mean? So very kind of keeping those things quite separate.
Is your friendship still the same?
Yeah, it's very, we're like sisters now. I think we're like unbreakable. We definitely have to like have friendship time, so be like not talk about work.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I learned through this process is when we argue, I try to remind myself it is sometimes quite emotional. You come up with an idea and you really want this to work. And you're like, oh, I'm working for this idea. And then sometimes, no, actually, for that reason, we should do that. And so it is about stepping away, but also reminding yourself, okay, the outcome that I want to achieve, we all want to achieve the same thing. Like, not being invested in your ideas and not being invested in your opinions, but really saying, okay, do I think this is for the goal that we want to go? And if someone's idea is better, is like letting go easily, essentially. So, and that is a practice, I'd say.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Luba. Thank you, Mae, for coming and sharing your story. We're gonna have the next event on the 20th of April, so guys, feel free to get in touch and know more about it. Stay here, there's drinks, network, we have the venue until 9 p.m., so thank you very much for coming.
We are here for questions if anyone else has any questions.